Lately, I've been watching a whole bunch of webinars and videos about creativity and innovation, especially in the digital space. And a lot of it centers around brainstorming and people discussing and using flip charts and just kind of bouncing ideas off each other, which is a completely valid way of creating new things. However, this process really caters for people who think in a naturally extroverted way. And although I chat on and although I run a YouTube channel, I am basically an introvert. I talk a lot, but I come up with most of my ideas on my own. So I wanted to talk about the creative process of introverts today, and I hope it's of interest. So the first thing I wanted to look at is the kind of overarching nature of extrovert thought versus introvert thought. Now, obviously, in any brainstorming or discussion or organization, there are always extroverts and introverts. But the brainstorming method of innovation really caters to an extrovert person who likes to collaborate, who is very visual and presentation based, who likes to discuss and come up with ideas and bounce things around and ultimately reach agreement with other people. But sometimes the truly innovative, the truly new thing might come from an extrovert. An extrovert thought processes are much more meditative. They tend to be independent. So an introvert actually gains energy from spending time alone. I come up with some of my best ideas while watching afternoon telly, which probably isn't the most natural space you would think of someone coming up with a new product idea, just watching, I don't know, the bidding room or something about gardens. It's seemingly random. It may be quite an eclectic group of thoughts and sometimes can come from a stream of consciousness of writing or just drawing on a piece of paper. And often the output of those thoughts is actually distilled much later than the thought process. So quite often you're writing things down that actually look quite jumbled, and they're only really distilled into a sensible kind of coherent presentation later, unlike when you're brainstorming in a room, and often it's necessary to put your ideas down on paper straight away. So when I think about the thought process for introverts, it's really quite quiet. It's often about thinking and ideating and drawing and creating on your own, writing streams of words down or the odd sentence here and there. And then and only then would you discuss those ideas with someone else. So it's quite different from brainstorming. It's almost the inverse, where when you brainstorm, you come out with an output and then go away and think about what you've created. In a kind of more introspective way, then you start with the thought process, and at the very end you discuss that thought process with someone else, and perhaps then is where that idea becomes shaped into a more kind of normalized kind of presentation for everyone else. So this is how I go about introverting, if you like. I often doodle. I have some examples of these things to show you, just so you can see how hilarious they are. I often write a series of words, just a kind of word association, if you like. And I kind of use an idea palette sort of version of events where I often write diagonally if I'm coming up with new things. I write on the lines if it's a presentation for someone else. But if it's for me, I often scrawl and scribble and really write quite illegibly, to be honest. I often produce lists of things to do as a kind of stream of consciousness thing and then go through and prioritize them. And the other thing that I found really useful is to just talk out loud, to not really have any particular frame of those ideas, but to literally speak a kind of single track of conversation, if you like, which doesn't really require comment, question, or interaction or interference. But by talking out loud, my ideas take shape, and that can be a really useful technique for me. So I wanted to show you some examples of things that I've drawn, written in the last couple of years. I found them in my notebook over the last week or so. And the first is doodling. So this looks entirely jumbled. It is simply a series of shapes, circles, lines. And what it does is just encourages my brain really to think in a different way. What I'm actually drawing is, I don't know, kind of links between ideas in my mind, and it's really not a coherent way of thinking. it's more that whilst I'm thinking, I need to do something with my hands, essentially. And sometimes when I'm drawing, the shapes represent my thoughts. And that's quite interesting when you look back at it. Obviously, this one really doesn't, but sometimes it does. The other thing I do is write kind of word series or associated words. So this is an example of a kind of series of opposites I wrote down. So I was thinking about inspiration and how you lead, how I might respond to feedback versus criticism, what motivates me and what produces determination in me. So motivation and determination are very much related, I think, but quite different in terms of the drive behind them and the reason why you might persist, if you like. And then the other thing that came into my head was success versus mediocrity. And so I guess the creative process is really about counteracting mediocrity and creating something completely new. You know, Steve Jobs, Dyson, all those inventors, they really thought carefully about the kind of inventions that they were coming up with. The other thing I do is a kind of idea palette. So I often draw shapes and then write words around them. You'll see the classic diagonal writing here. My writing is scrawly, jumbled. Sometimes it would take me a good few minutes to work out what I've actually come up with when I go to distill something like this into a complete plan. And the last thing I kind of do is write a list of things to do. So it's similar to a product backlog in my mind. It literally is, you know, a list of chores, if you like, but relate it to work or product design or coming up with ideas. I tend to just write the list straight out of my head, then compile it and prioritize it, starring essential items and kind of producing a broad timeline of when I want to achieve something. So I'm almost developing it into an overarching roadmap just for me. And what it means is then I can look at that list of things to do or ideas to do and kind of focus my mind on the step-by-step process of what that's going to end up being. But at this stage, I don't always know what I'm going to produce, to be honest, at the end. It is very much stream of consciousness kind of ideating. So a list of things to do for me looks something like this. Some people will now have been doing a talk series based on my leadership book. I write lots of mental health blogs. And, you know, here I've ticked off and starred the things that I feel are really important for me. So, yeah, this is my ideas coming together, if you like. And then talking out loud, sometimes this can completely phase the other person unless they're fully prepared. Literally, this is me talking as I'm talking now, perhaps about a particular product or a problem or you know, coming up with a solution or process to something. As I speak, what I'm thinking comes out of my mouth. And quite often I don't really know the precise kind of train of thought that I'm following in that. And sometimes the other person will be totally confused. So then I have to explain, and that forces me to shape my thoughts into a more coherent structure. And that's really what talking out loud does for me. It's not brainstorming exactly. It's more kind of forcing you to elucidate on the whys, wherefores and hows of an issue. And sometimes the reaction of the person in front of me can help kind of make me realize that an idea is really stupid, or make me realize that actually an idea is really good and I just need to extend it, explain it, break it down more for other people to really understand what I'm talking about. So the output of most of these kind of thought process, creative flows, if you like, is generally a series of diagrams, bullet points and workflows, you know, a list of things to do, but also kind of progression of maybe a vector diagram or something similar. And so that's really stage one for me, and that's really for me, it's not for anyone else. Quite a lot of the time if someone looks at that particular output as stage one, they would just look completely confused at me. So obviously, in order to make it kind of palatable for other people, then I turn it into a PowerPoint or a full proposal or an overarching roadmap with kind of dates and broad times and quarters, for example. So that's me and my creative process. I hope it was interesting. I'm going to carry on talking about innovation, and I have some more ideas to kind of present and display, but also some more thoughts around leadership which are coming up. So I hope that you're enjoying this series of videos, and I look forward to meeting you all at my next discussion.